Hello and welcome to UAS Magazine's podcast series. I'm your host, Dayna Bastian. The UAS Summit and Expo is right around the corner, taking place October 4th through the 5th in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Our guest today will be participating on a panel to discuss the FAA's BVLOS ARC recommendations that will advance the UAS industry and raise the standard of safety. He is currently the Executive Vice President of Government and Public Affairs at the Association for Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International. Today's guest is Michael Robbins. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to join you today on the podcast.
Thanks again. Well, Michael, you're currently leading all advocacy and strategic communication initiatives at AUVSI. Can you share with our listeners a bit more about your background?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks. So I came to AUVSI in a full-time capacity, right sort of at the heart of COVID. So in June of 2020, so just over 2 years ago. And I came in at a time when AUVSI was making a strategic pivot to focus more on advocacy and to expand its work both in the air domain with drones and UAS, but also to expand to the advanced air mobility and counter UAS, as well as expanded work in the maritime and in ground domains. And it's been a great just over 2 years. We've made a lot of progress, and we have a lot of work to do. Previously, AUVSI had been a client of mine, so I had worked with AUVSI before. I co-own a business consulting firm called Intrepid, and AUVSI was one of our clients. I was actually working with them specifically on counter UAS issues. I led AUVSI's effort in conjunction with Airports Council International North America to run the Blue Ribbon Task Force on UAS mitigation at airports back in 2019. So that was my first sort of entry point into AUVSI. Previously, most of my work had been in sort of what we'll call it traditional aviation, or a lot of commercial aviation. So both consulting for a number of U.S. and international airlines, as well as previously working with the Airline Pilots Association, where I had a very similar role to the one I have at AUVSI, but at ALPA, the Airline Pilots Association. Before coming to ALPA, I worked on Capitol Hill for 10 years. So I was working for a member of Congress from the great state of Michigan, where I'm from originally, the late John Dingell. And I'm also an intelligence officer in the Navy, in the Reserve, which sometimes is takes me away from work a little bit, but also gives me a different perspective on things. I think that often comes in useful when working with emerging technologies. That's a little bit about me.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Michael. It sounds like you have a great background, which has led to a perfect position and perfect fit for you at AUVSI. And if I remember correctly, this is your first UAS Summit. So we're really excited to have you on our main stage and to share your insight with attendees. Can you give our listeners a little sneak peek into some of the discussion that will take place on the stage regarding the BVLOS ARC recommendations?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's going to be a great conversation. We're very lucky to have Eileen Lockhart moderating. Eileen, as I'm sure most of your listeners know, was the co-chair of the Beyond Visual Line of Sight Aviation Rulemaking Committee. So she's going to bring a unique perspective as having been engaged in every working group and every sub-working group and compiling the final report and being really involved in that from a 30,000-foot level. So having her knowledge and sort of leading the conversation, I think is really going to add a lot of value. I think the ARC conversation will go in, I think, a couple of different directions. We'll look at some of the opportunities that the ARC itself presented to the FAA to consider when it ultimately writes its Beyond Visual Line of Sight rules. Some of the challenges that the ARC report also sort of brought to light. Certainly, there was far from unanimous consent on the final report, and then within a number of elements of the report, there were portions of real controversy. Typically, not so much within our community. By and large, the UAS community was fairly united, and I think hopefully we can talk about that a little bit as well. A lot of the challenges in the sort of confrontation came from, again, sort of the traditional aviation community, or those that are maybe looking to preserve old ways of doing things and trying to not integrate with new technology, or not let new technology integrate. So think we'll have opportunity to talk about that. And what I hope we have time to talk about, but I think, maybe less important for this audience, because I think most people attending this summit are probably already, sort of sold on the societal benefits and the economic benefits of drones. But one thing that the ARC report did really well, I think, and has been well received on Capitol Hill by lawmakers, is the first section isn't really about what the final rule should be at all. It's a justification for the rule in the first place. So how drones contribute to society, the different use cases, and how they can make jobs that are dangerous and dirty and dull safer, and actually expand workforce opportunities. The life-saving prospect of using drones for search and rescue and as first responders, and delivering life-saving medication or organs. There's so many use cases that we in the industry all kind of know about, but maybe not everybody involved in writing the rule would necessarily know about. So the report actually, before it even gets to the substantive recommendations, sort of lays out the societal and economic case for why this is important to do in the first place, which was a unique approach, I think, to the rulemaking, and one that certainly has been well received both on Capitol Hill and seems to be well received by the FAA as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of rules, let's dive into the drone regulatory landscape. Can you talk a bit about some of the upcoming legislation that you believe will help drive the drone industry forward?
Yeah, so we're kind of at a really important time right now, because, and this is a good time to have this conversation with the community, because next year the FAA reauthorization expires, and Congress will be seeking to reauthorize the FAA by about this time next year, right about now, so about 12 months from now. So between now and then, a lot of work will go into writing a new FAA bill. A lot of work has already been done. We submitted AUVSI submitted our recommendations to the Senate Commerce Committee and the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee back in June of this year. So a lot of pre-work has already been done, and I think that provides us a real opportunity to pass some legislation that can move the regulatory environment forward in a meaningful way. Some of the areas that we're really focused on and really want to lean into, I mean, first and foremost, sort of how the FAA actually is structured and how it's funded. We know that for innovative technologies like drones and advanced air mobility, they have severe staffing challenges within the FAA. They have subject matter expertise shortfalls, and just the way that the FAA is structured sometimes doesn't lend itself to moving with speed for keeping up with advanced technology. The FAA knows how to go through the process of certifying large commercial aircraft and business aviation aircraft. Those systems don't change a tremendous amount year over year, yet alone month over month. But with emerging technology like drones, it is changing very rapidly, and so that's definitely something that we want to try and address legislatively. The ARC also made some recommendations for how the FAA should streamline approval processes, both for drones themselves through the type certification process, the platforms, but also streamline some of the operational approvals as well, and ways in which risk profiles can be taken into account and sort of standardized. Some checklists can be made for companies to follow, and move the process forward in a more consistent way. Whether the FAA does that on its own, or whether we want Congress to pursue that legislatively, I guess we'll find out over the next year. With whether we see an initial rule from the FAA before the FAA reauthorization in Congress moves forward. We'll see how that plays out. But we have 18 pages of recommendations in our initial draft, and I think we'll refine that and add to it in some ways between now and the next couple of months.
That's great. Well, we're really looking forward to seeing, what becomes of this next year, of course, as well. Do you see any roadblocks to any of the legislation that may negatively impact the industry, Michael?
Well, I mean, certainly the broader FAA reauthorization just historically has typically not passed on time. Unfortunately, as anybody who follows the news knows, and this was true certainly when I was there, more than a decade ago, but it's gotten significantly worse. Congress is a bit dysfunctional at times and struggles to get things done on time. So there's always the possibility that we could be facing an FAA shutdown again, which is something that you may remember, has occurred a couple of different occasions, and that's never a good situation because even before the agency shuts down, government work stops and they have to do contingency planning, and that really sets things back. So we're really pushing to try and make sure this FAA reauthorization is done on time, and it's been very well received from Capitol Hill, and I think they're certainly doing they're putting the effort now and the work now to try and get ahead so that doesn't happen. But that's always sort of an existential challenge. Also, we continue to face headwinds from sort of the traditional aviation community, particularly sometimes in the general aviation, sort of the hobbyist and GA pilots, sort of resistance to ADS-B equipage and sort of figuring out the right way to address right-of-way issues. I think that's something that both the FAA is going to tackle, but I think we may see Congress getting involved in that too, because there's pretty strong feelings on both sides of that issue. Another issue that I think we're really hoping to tackle, is sort of the environmental review process for operations. Right now, the NEPA review process is, it's important. It's an important step that needs to be taken into consideration, certainly. But the way in which it's conducted right now for drone operations probably doesn't make sense and isn't allowing industry to scale very, very quickly. So, we may run into some headwinds from Congress on that, but that's definitely something that we're gonna try and proactively address, so that when a company is going into a new operation, the FAA is doing that NEPA review for how the operation is actually being conducted, whether maybe that's just hypothetically like say 100 drone operations a day versus what is hypothetically possible, which is how the FAA is doing the NEPA review now. So maybe looking at, instead of 100 of which the company is planning to do, many thousands of operations, which gives a completely different review process, take much longer, and leads to delays in actually getting operational approvals through. So that's something else that is sort of a challenge that industry is facing right now that we're hoping to work through.
Right. And, there's always going to be those challenges, but we're really hoping that some of those get lifted a little bit here within the next year or so, so we can see that progress in the industry continue to grow. Changing gears here for a second, Michael, AUVSI recently announced a collaboration with the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU, on a new initiative to further commercial cyber methodologies. Can you share some details about the initiative, its goals, how to become involved, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's sort of a very exciting time at AUVSI as we've really stepped into cybersecurity in a very meaningful way. We sort of surveyed the landscape and looked at, okay, what are some of the challenges that exist to the integration of drones and what are things that could set us back in a meaningful way? And cybersecurity sort of stood out as one that needed to be addressed, but also government wasn't necessarily proactively addressing. So as the trade association for the autonomous and uncrewed systems industry, we decided to step in and fill that leadership void. So we have set up our Trusted Cyber program, which has a working group of members, of AUVSI members and others in the broader industry and community. We have some government observers that are taking part in that as well, and we're building a standards framework of all of the various cyber standards that could apply to various elements of uncrewed systems operations. So whether that's just broad corporate hygiene for companies, product security, supply chain security and supply chain sourcing, data links, and wireless communications. So taking a very wide view, but also a very specific view into each of these various areas, and finding what standards already exist throughout government or standards bodies that could apply. And we're building that framework now, and we'll hopefully ultimately build some sort of a certification to that framework so companies can actually certify that they are compliant with all of those various standards. And And Blue UAS, which is a program that the Defense Innovation Unit has been running for about 2 years, is an example of that. DIU stood that up sort of in response to congressional legislation that prohibited the DoD from purchasing drones from certain countries, including China, and specifically wanted to certify that drones, were not from and had no components from China, but also met a very high cyber threshold so they could be used for DoD purposes. So DIU set up Blue UAS, and to date they have vetted 13 programs, and they've done just a really marvelous job with a very limited budget and a very small team. And when we set up our Trusted Cyber program, and we were doing our outreach to government stakeholders across government, we obviously had built strong relationships with the DIU, and we engaged them in this conversation. And they, we kind of came around to the idea of AUVSI sort of picking up where DIU has left off now, and picking up the Blue UAS program and operating on their behalf. So they'll still be involved, but we're going to handle a lot of the work on their behalf and vetting of drones that want to be Blue UAS compliant for commercial purposes or selling to federal stakeholders outside of DoD. We'll handle that entire process using DIU's cyber methodology. And then if a platform wishes to be sold to the DoD and the DoD wants it as a potential platform they want to purchase, then we'll handle the whole cyber compliance up to the final piece, and then we'll turn it back over to DIU, and DIU will take it over the finish line within the Pentagon, within DoD. So that's our broader cyber program, and then also specifically the Blue UAS program. And anyone who wants to get involved can find more information on our website, or they can certainly reach out to me directly. My information's on the AUVSI website as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all those exciting details with our listeners, Michael. This is a very exciting time, and we're excited to see this program take off. Again, to our listeners, if you do want to find out more information about the programs, please check out the AUVSI website. Well, Michael, we are nearing the end of our time here today. I want to thank you for joining us. I do like to end our podcast with a little bit of a fun question. As we've chatted about, it is your first time coming to North Dakota. So what are you most looking forward to? Or have you kind of been given some guidelines maybe on places that you should check out?
I haven't gotten any guidance, no. But I'm looking forward to going out to the UAS test site at Grand Sky and definitely seeing that in person. I think that's going to be great. I know there's an event there on Monday night, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. And then, as I mentioned, I'm in the military, in the reserve, so I've got a DoD ID, so I'll probably make my way over to the Air Force Base too and drive around and see what's to be seen there as well. I'm definitely an airplane geek and love, in particular, military aircraft. So I'll be seeing what's out there that I can get my eyes on.
Absolutely. Well, if you need any recommendations, we'll be sure to send you some. So we're located right here in Grand Forks, North Dakota ourselves. So we'll send you some recommendations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, thanks again for joining us, Michael. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
All right. I really enjoyed it, and I'm so looking forward to the summit. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you.
Thanks again. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. And until next time.